Hello, and welcome to the Organizing AAPI Communities event. Over the last few weeks, the California Democratic Party and its AAPI caucus have been working together to uplift the voices of leaders throughout California, especially from our hard-to-reach communities. We gather during the month of May, AAPI Heritage Month, a time to reflect on the stories of our AAPI sisters and brothers, especially those who came before us. My story? I'm the second oldest of 6 children born to immigrant parents from China, who established a laundry and dry cleaning business in order to build a better life for their family. Growing up, I helped my parents take care of the books for the family business. And within one generation, after much sacrifice and hard work, my parents are able to see their daughter become and serve as the CFO of the 5th largest economy in the world, as your state controller, minding the books for the great state of California. Over the course of the history of our diverse AAPI communities, hate and discrimination have marked our journeys. Yet today, I am more hopeful than ever. What we are experiencing today is not new, but what is new is our collective power. Political, economic, social, multi-generational, and personal power to fight back hate and discrimination. And how do we build that collective power? Organize, organize, organize. The California Democratic Party is building a pathway to support our young California Democratic leaders. Please visit the link in the chat and consider making an investment to build our leadership in the party so that our young voices are heard and so they may join in this important work to be sure that our AAPI communities and all communities are part of a California for all. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our Organizing in the AAPI community event. My name is Sherry Yang, and I am the Communications Director for the California Democratic Party. I want to thank our events team, Vincent and India, and all the tech people who helped coordinate this entire event this evening. We really put together this event tonight with the intention in mind of hearing from leading community organizers, mainly in our hard to reach AAPI communities. Today, California has the largest Asian American and Pacific Islander immigrant population in the country, and about a third of Asian Americans live in California, making up 16% of the population. I'm Hmong, which means I'm a member of one of the hardest to reach communities in California, but there are really so many other ethnic populations in the AAPI community that people really don't know about. You have the Mian, the Samoan, the Vietnamese, Bangladeshi, Laotian, Malaysian, Filipino, and so many more. So I'm really happy to be here moderating this amazing group of community leaders who have been on the ground within the communities and working closely with these communities to give them the tools to learn about advocacy and our democratic process. So I'd like to get started. I'd like to introduce the parliamentary chair for the California Democratic Party Asian Pacific Islander Caucus. He's served as a staff here at the California Democratic Party, so he's been giving me a bunch of pointers. And so he's just really passionate about helping people and giving people guidance to our young Democrats across the state. So I'd like to introduce Aref Aziz. Aref.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and thank you so much to all of our amazing staff at the CDP. I was very thankful for the opportunity to work there for a short while. A huge shout out to Emma Harper, who works with us at the caucuses, and it's just, does so much. My name is Aref. I'm the parliamentary chair of the California Democratic Party Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, and I am so excited to be here with you all. API representation is at an all-time high point compared to years past, and we have so much more work to do within the party. The API caucus was one of the original 6 caucuses meant to do exactly what this event is about, organizing within the AAPI community. You can follow us at CDP API Caucus or www.apicaucus.com. We have an amazing leadership team under our chair, Deepa Sharma, who is the national co-chair for South Asians for Biden. So we're so excited to have her leadership at the California level. And we just have an amazing team with the largest board we've ever elected. So we are really excited to get to work, and I'm so excited to be here on behalf of my board. Thank you again, Sherry, and for all of your work in putting this together. And thank you so much, Controller Yee, for that introduction. It was very amazing.
Awesome. So our next speaker was born and raised in the island, and I'm Tutuilu in America Samoa. And it was not until the year 2007 when his maternal grandparents had brought him and his sisters over to the mainland US. Vo served as the co-chair of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders for Biden and Harris. Currently, he serves as a president of the Pacific Islander Democratic Club of San Mateo County and president of the College of San Mateo. So I'm super happy to introduce Talavo Almavai.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Talavo Almavai, go by Vo for short. And thank you again, Sherry, for having us here. And yes, I hail from the island of Tutuila in American Samoa, a small American territory, about 10 hours from here, a 10-hour flight. It is an honor to be here. We are the Pacific Islander community. We are a minority within the minority. We're a very small subgroup of the AAPI umbrella, which is a very broad umbrella. So we are very honored and humbled that I have been given this opportunity to be the only Pacific Islander voice here this evening. But I'm excited to discuss some of the issues that we have going forward. And thank you again for having us here. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. And next, this person has more than 10 years of experience in organizing in hard to reach communities, as well as policy advocacy work. She served as the director of California with the Southeast Asian Resource Action Center, and served as a co-director with Hmong Innovating Politics, where she developed an infrastructure to organize Sacramento and in Fresno. Currently, she's the executive director for the California Commission on AAPI Affairs. I'd like to introduce Ngo Yang.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and thank you so much to CDP for having me. Happy API Heritage Month. I'll keep it short. I just want to say again, my name is Ngo Yang, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. And our final panelist is a true trailblazer. This person has played a pivotal role in the passage of groundbreaking civil rights legislation, not only here in California, but in Nevada and Washington, D.C., and helped with the implementation of statewide public education campaigns and the elections of hundreds of openly LGBTQ+ and pro-equality candidates up and down the ballot. He's currently the executive director for the Equality California and has helped usher in a dramatic expansion of Equality California's budget, staff, and programming. I'd like to introduce Tony Hong.
Thanks, Sherry. I just wanted to say thank you to the CDP for holding this event. And I think it's really timely, given that last week would have been Vincent Chin's 66th birthday. And I think particularly for me, as sitting at the intersection of AAPI and LGBTQ identities with Pride Month, coming up in June, just really a timely conversation as we sort of think through how do we continue to organize in our various communities so that we have true lived equality for all our communities. So, thank you to CDP for holding this. And I would be remiss if I didn't just say thank you to State Controller Betty Yee, who has been a longtime board member of Equality California, and really, she and Stephen really stepped up to save the organization as we were in trouble a number of years ago post-marriage. So just wanted to thank her for her service, to the community broadly.
Great, awesome. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. We have just so much to talk about. And being a Hmong woman, I know how hard it is to reach out to hard to reach AAPI communities. I am a child of refugees, and the Hmong community is super new here in the United States. So our community is just learning about democracy and the democratic process and organizing, and this is all new to us. And within the API community, it's so diverse. we all have similar stories, but such different stories as well. So I want to start off with Aref and asking if you can share how and why, and personally, why you got involved in community engagement and just your story.
Oh, there we go, unmuted. Absolutely. So I actually started at what is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. It's UDCs, United Democratic Campaigns, and those local club campaigns that are run every 2 years during the election cycle. And I was a student at Ohlone College, and these two candidates had come in to interview for us. One was Garrett Yee, and the other one was a certain senator named Bob Wojciechowski. And he was running for assembly at the time. And as a student, I was like, wow, these are very interesting people. Like, they both have a lot to say. I'm going to get to learn more about them and figure this out. And, Bob, who I found very charming as a student, and he was so enthusiastic about my activism and my willingness to get involved, got me plugged in and told me to, volunteer with the United Democratic Campaign. And it was actually in that process that I met Deepa Sharma, who was our chair at the API caucus. And looking around, I hadn't seen these kind of brown API voices, and even myself, like, understanding. I remember when Jennifer Ong, who was a former board officer at the API caucus, came to me and said, hey, do you want to run for API caucus? Like, you're an amazing API organizer. I'm like, I'm Asian? And so we actually talked about it. And I remember, she had approached Deepa as well. And we talked about it, and we talked about what this identity meant and why it was so important for people who aren't normally considered under the API umbrella, like myself as an Afghan American, or, Deepa as a Indian American who has South Asians and Indian Americans have more recently kind of been kind of vaulted in that umbrella. And so not seeing those faces around, but getting all of this support from my community, I was really able to learn and just take everything in. So I did everything from volunteering on campaigns to running the UDC and winning a bunch of races and awards, to working at the party and interning in the legislature and all kinds of fun stuff, just because I really wanted to learn, and I didn't really see a lot of people that look like me in this space. So, as I do now, and as we do on the caucus now, we really try to go back into our younger generation and recruit people with a lot of promise. For example, Shivam Patel on our board and Zara Haji on our board, just amazing young professionals that are, just going to bring a lot of energy to our board. And being able to pay that forward has just been so amazing. And that's that investment, community investment is really how I got involved. And it's what I try to pay it forward with as well.
Thank you so much, Arif. So Tony, I'm gonna go to you and ask you how you personally got involved in community engagement and a little bit about your story as well. So.
Thanks, Sherry. I sort of just stumbled into sort of community organizing. At the time, I first got civically engaged when I was in college at USC. I was, volunteering with the presidential campaigns in the lead up to 2008, but really didn't sort of jump into community, full-blown community organizing until after Prop 8 happened here in California. At the time, I was not out yet to friends and family. I knew, I was gay for quite a number of years, but hadn't sort of publicly, accepted that for my own self. And at the time, I was going to school for foreign policy. I was hoping to end up in the State Department. And at the time, I was supposed to go to Mexico for a research trip, and then the swine flu pandemic happened, and that trip was canceled. So I was sort of stumbling around to find an internship, and actually found a field organizing internship with Equality California. And that led me to canvassing, neighborhoods throughout Los Angeles County, talking to complete strangers about what it means for same-sex couples to get married. And that, type of one-on-one conversations, having, tough conversations about the acceptance for LGBTQ folks, caused me to come to terms with my own identity and come out to my own friends and family. But that sort of led me on the path of advocacy for LGBTQ folks specifically, over the past 11 years. And I think, during that process, working at Equality California, but also, being on boards at the national and local level for LGBTQ organizations have really allowed me to, embrace all facets of the community. And I think during that process allowed me to really embrace my own heritage of being, Vietnamese American, and embracing, the AAPI identity part of myself. I grew up in Texas, and I, was one of the only kids of color growing up, in sort of the suburbs of Houston. And over the past number of years, really gotten involved with organizations like CAUSE to, how do we lift up, LGBT AAPI leaders in their own communities and build that pipeline for folks. So, I'm excited to be here with such a great, esteemed panelists here on this call.
Awesome. And next, I'm going to I'm going to ask you the same question. If you can tell your personal story of why you got involved in community organizing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sherry. So I too am a child of Hmong refugees, and I grew up in a low-income neighborhood in Sacramento. So where I grew up, there's very little resources, right? Because, if you're aware of Sacramento, there's a difference between North Sacramento and also Sacramento, and I grew up in the North. And, there's just not a lot of resources or services that really targets, building up Southeast Asian young people or even the families there. But at the same time, I was definitely growing up and watching my late father, who was extremely involved in the community. Sherry, you know what I'm talking about in terms of, our fathers being, really good at connecting, right? And he was really about building, bridging information from what he understood, what was happening to the community, and ultimately contributing to creating that access of information for our community. And I was, even to this day, even though he's not around anymore, I'm still very inspired by what he's done. And so when I was in high school, I kind of did the same thing. There's, as I mentioned, very few programs that are available to us. I think the only thing that we had in North Sacramento was UC Davis Upper Bound program. And I cherish that program so much, but that's just one program, right? And I also realized that not a lot of my peers were very aware of, even the college application process, life outside of our neighborhood. I don't think they thought a lot about that. Nor did they ever feel like they could step onto a college campus and felt that they could see themselves there. So in high school, I think that was when I really start to build my political consciousness. And my friends and I, we decided to kind of take matters into our own hands. We pulled together, a high school conference for Hmong youth and families in the neighborhood. And we just kind of pulled on our networks. We knew some college students from Davis. We knew some college students from Sac State. And we just asked all the adults in our lives if they're willing to donate to us, right? So it was like, a few dollars, $20, but we were able to, put on this really big conference for Hmong families. And, I think for me, it was like one of those moments that really changed my life, where I was like, wow, I really deepened my value in what it means to have access, even if it's just as simple as access to information, really being able to bring the community along with me, and then also being able to take action. I think where I started to hone in on my skills was when I also went to college at UC Berkeley, and my freshman year was 2002. And that was also when the US started to target and deport Cambodian refugees. And so that was actually my first political campaign, was learning about it and then educating folks on campus and really, fighting to end deportation, which is still a fight that's moving and going on right now.
Thank you so much. And next is Talavo. You can share your story with us as well about your personal story and why you got involved in community advocacy.
Thank you for the question, Sherry. And I certainly love everyone's answers, and I can certainly echo and agree with what everyone has said thus far. But there's actually someone terminology called tautua, which is servitude or service. That goes with a Salmon proverb that states oleale tautua, or oleale le pule tautua, which means the path to leadership is through servitude. And that's always been something that's been instilled to me from when I was a young kid, and I've always been driven and passionate about serving my community. So when we moved to the United States in 2007, I was only 11 at that time. And of course, we were in the midst of an election, and a historical one, that is. I was in my 7th grade English class, and I still remember vividly watching on the TV President Obama winning a historical election back when I was only 12 at that time, and I was in 7th grade. That was certainly a turning point to me, that I saw someone that, of course, looked like me, a person of color, that stood up there and was being sworn in, or that just won an election for the highest office in the nation. That certainly drove me to get involved, but there wasn't much that I could do at that time, being that I was only 12. So my first ever presidential election that I was able to vote in was in 2016. And I volunteered and worked with the grassroots campaign and grassroots effort here and within our local county, working to get out votes for Hillary Clinton at that time, since she was our party's nominee. And then again, I was given the opportunity to work for the Joe Biden campaign in galvanizing the Pacific Islanders to get out and turn and participate in and vote in the 2020 election. But for me, being active, and at least what drives me is when I was younger, I would see all these opportunities and these programs that were there for other students, and that there wasn't really enough resources or opportunities that were there for us, for Pacific Islanders. So that was one of the biggest things of why I wanted to get involved, and I wanted to make sure that resources would be provided to my community. So one of the most recent work that I did was census work for the 2020 census, and we were able to really galvanize our Pacific Islander community and see the importance of being counted, because most of these resources and the allocation of these funds are based on the data and the numbers that are in the census. So if we don't fill that out, they'll never know that we're there. So that was a big effort that I was participating in, and I look forward to possibly participating in it again in another 10 years. But I think it's very important that not only us as Pacific Islanders, but all communities of colors are counted. And I think that was a proud moment, that I was able to get a lot more higher turnout of Pacific Islanders this time compared to the data that we've seen in 2010. Because when I was presented the data back in 2010, or when I started the work for this year, or for this most recent census, I was pretty shocked, because I knew there was definitely more Pacific Islanders here
Right.
that I had. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hearing a theme between everybody, which is resources and identity. And I'll start with you, Vo, if you're ready. I know you just gave an answer. You came to the mainland in 2007, which isn't too long ago. I remember, I'm Hmong living in California, and in California here, we are such a diverse community throughout the entire state. And when I went to DC back in 2015, it was like a complete culture shock to me. It was like, for the first time, I got to see America in another perspective and another view. And then I lived in North Carolina, where I was like, there's nobody that looks like me. And I just got to see the United States, and also appreciate the United States and the history and everything that we've gone through and the progress that we've made. So Vo, can you tell me about some of your personal challenges in getting involved in advocacy?
Certainly. Even with census work, and I think census and even election works, outreach and that worked very hand in hand. And the biggest challenge for me was just simply getting our community to understand why it's important that we're counted, and why it's important that we participate in voting and that we're civically engaged. There certainly is a big disconnect for older generation Pacific Islanders, one, due to the language barrier, just not understanding how our political system works. So through my work of census and election outreach this past year and past 2 years, I am really optimistic in the engagement of our community moving forward, because I saw a lot of our up and coming young leaders, people my age and even younger, in high school going into college, that were very excited and interested in getting involved and staying involved, and then sharing that information with their parents. So that's certainly one of the biggest challenge that I would say, amongst many other ones, but that I'll stick with that.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Tony next. There is a complete generational divide, and I heard you talking about, being LGBTQ plus and being Asian, and the LGBTQ community is recognizing the LGBTQ plus community within the Asian community is such a new concept for Asian people, especially because we have the older generation and then the younger generation. What are some of the personal challenges you face in getting involved in advocacy when you were younger?
Sure. I mean, I think, a number of things. I think, from a personal level, as I, came out to my parents and sort of having to explain sort of what LGBTQ meant, right? And sort of that I wanted to do this as a career, and, that they didn't understand what sort of legislation, politics is, and sort of having to explain both from that facet while explaining sort of my own identity as an LGBTQ person has been an ongoing, was a journey. My parents, were not initially accepting, but now, it took them a while to get there, but really supportive in terms of the work. But it was a long road in terms of, explaining that piece, just given sort of the generational divide and sort of where, they came from as, refugees from the Vietnam War. And I think, within the queer community itself, I think it's, a journey there as well. I think, there's a perception of what LGBTQ folks look like. I think, the mainstream perception is that, these are, wealthier, cisgender white men, living in West Hollywood, going to Equinox, driving Benzes, right? And I think, having to recognize that LGBTQ folks are part of all communities, and that, we are, we're trans, we are, lesbians in Central Valley, whatever it may be, there's such a rich diversity within the LGBTQ plus community, and recognizing that. But I've, really been heartened over, the past number of months with the rise of AAPI hate crimes, that, there's been a really strong intentionality in terms of making sure that our two movements are really intersecting with each other and standing up for one another's priorities. And, we're lucky to live here in California, where we've had just strong leaders within the California Democratic Party, folks like Congressman Mark Takano, Assembly Member Evan Lowe, now Assembly Member Alex Lee, really some strong representation of LGBTQ plus and AAPI folks. And I think for us here at Equality California, it's how do we continue to lift up queer AAPI voices, because, there's really just a dearth of, leadership, particularly at the local level, as we're, thinking about recruitment, running folks for higher office. How can we help support those folks at the local level, particularly in places like Orange County, LA, the Bay Area, et cetera.
And just to add to that, within the community itself, are you starting to see a broader culture change in accepting and recognizing the LGBTQ plus community within the older generation? Is that just go for it?
Yeah, no, I think obviously, the community is not a monolith. And I think, a prime example is around marriage equality. And I think now looking to trans acceptance. So there's been a lot of great work done, both by Equality California, as well as a number of our partners, folks like API Equality Northern California, where there's been a lot of, in-language works working with specific communities in terms of how do we sort of change hearts and minds around marriage equality, around trans acceptance, around accepting, your own networks. Obviously, families is such a strong tying point within, our collective communities. And I think as folks, feel comfortable coming out to their own networks, that's really shown such a radical shift in terms of acceptance for the LGBTQ plus community within AAPI communities.
That's great. Okay, so Aref, I'm going to go to you next. You said that there weren't a lot of people who looked like me when you first started. Can you talk a little bit more about your personal challenges in getting involved with advocacy work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and actually, just because I definitely was very moved by Tony, what Tony had just said, I want to take a second to recognize the specific privilege that I do have as even though as an AAPI activist from like a underrepresented community, I'm both like straight and also like a cis male who presents in the way that my community historically would like me to present it. And what that means is that all of that sexism and misogyny and homophobia that a lot of activist voices that need to be heard face just from their own community in trying to get involved. I don't have to face as much of that, but being a person of color and coming from a Muslim background, obviously, I face a little bit of discrimination in that process. And that was 10 years ago, right? Or 11, oh God, I'm old now. But I've been involved for a very long time. And even now, I was at a San Diego Muslim Democrats forum not too long ago, and Avista Helmandi, Fatma Iqbal Zubair, and Hannah Jodat were all speaking about their experience as first-time delegates getting involved with the party, all being women, and just how triggering that experience was for me, because those were all things like not only did they deal with all the things that I dealt with, but they dealt with like the sexism and everything else on top of that. And I also look at my one of my colleagues, Harris Mahajadidi, on the API caucus. He's an Afghan American, and like unlike me, is a member of the LGBTQ community. And he recently came out last year, and it was a big deal. And it was so amazing to be able to be there and to support that journey. I really do think that the Democratic Party is a big tent party for so many different people, and our inclusion and our ability to come together despite our differences and to learn and understand each other is what makes us an amazing party. But at the same time, we still face those challenges of bullying based on where we come from or what our political views might be. And with an API population that's primarily the fastest growing segment is new immigrants, we really have to look at ways where like this newer, younger generation, myself included, can bridge that gap on those social issues and bring those voices together. So, I really think the challenges that underrepresented AAPI voices face are a lot of the challenges other communities face. And I just want to highlight the amazing effort people put in to get involved and stay involved in the party despite all that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. But so Goia, you are the only woman on this panel, so lots of pressure. Just kidding, no pressure. So you and I had a conversation the other day as Hmong women, and I'm going to go a little deeper on this question. I was very lucky to grow up with a mom who is a feminist. I remember being 5 years old and she's a refugee, and she comes home and she's like, oh, I heard about this thing called birth control where women get to choose like what they can do with their body. And I was like, when you're that age, you don't really know what your mom's talking about, but then you grow up and, my mother was always very like, you're a strong Asian woman. You can do it. Think about you and, think about just live your life the best way that you think an Asian woman needs to live their life. But I think being Hmong, we know that our cultures, we not only have to go out into the world where we face this culture of misogyny, as Aref said, but we also have to face a lot of challenges within our own culture. So beyond language barrier, because I've been hearing a lot of like there's language barrier and stuff like that, what are some of the challenges you face in engaging in the AAPI community?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sherry. I will come back to that point. But I was also just going to highlight, you know, that I definitely agree with what Vo had mentioned in terms of the disconnect, right? You know, for me, it's also really interesting to see that Hmong refugees who have come here and have naturalized, or even like the refugees who spoke very little English, like probably had elementary English back in Laos, that they were really the ones that helped to kind of spearhead a lot of like the advocacy you see in the 70s and 80s and even in the 90s, right? But then at the same time, you know, as I mentioned earlier, for the kids, we, you know, or even the 1.5 generation folks that were growing up in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't a lot of like engagement, right? That happened like whether at school or in the neighborhoods. And so it really created that disconnection. It really sent a message to our communities that they were not included in these larger conversations. And so for me, what I see in terms of like some of the challenges is that it's actually not that hard to engage the elder population to even get out the vote. Sometimes, of course, the language barrier is an issue. What is the population that's harder to engage are the folks that are like from their 30s to about 50s, right? That's the population that grew up in the 80s and 90s. And, you know, they still kind of have internalized that belief that their voice doesn't matter, right? And so one is like breaking that, you know, barrier that exists within themselves, and being able to educate them and let them know why certain issues, you know, matter in their life, right? So a lot of it is like providing that education, and then also, you know, going back to what I've learned from my dad is like bridging that information. So, you know, I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that as well. Yes, language is a barrier. It's definitely, or not language is a barrier, but, you know, with the lack of language access, that creates a barrier. The other end is like what I was saying earlier is that it doesn't allow a lot of trust to be built, right? Because they, you know, our communities, a big population of our communities have felt like there is no longer that trust. So what we end up having to do when we're reaching out to the community is that it's not a one-time conversation. Like you have to talk to them multiple times to really build that relationship, because they're not sure. They're not sure, even though we look like them and we speak the same language, they're not sure if we're there to collect information from them and then bounce, or that we're really there because we care about who they are and what they believe in. So the relationship building matters, right? I know that oftentimes it's like, it's supposed to be like you message one time and hopefully they get it, but it's like, no, you have to message like 5 times and then maybe the 6th time they might come around, right? And so, you know, I know that during COVID, it's been challenging for census outreach and even getting out the vote in November, and because we're not able to do like the groundwork as hard, right? And those are also what matters to them, is that you're willing to go to their house to have that conversation with them. I think the other end, and absolutely, you know, as the Hmong woman who is in these different leadership positions, sometimes, you know, some of the hardest pushback comes from Hmong men. And it's not, you know, it's not all of the Hmong men, and I know some people are going to push me on that, but a lot of times it does come from the Hmong men who feel a little threatened that, you know, Hmong women are getting, you know, some of the recognition that we deserve, right? And so, you know, sometimes like the barriers is like the lack of collaboration from within our own communities.
Thank you so much for that. And the fact that you are the only woman on this panel. I'm sure a lot of people beyond just the Hmong community, also a lot of women feel that way as well. So thank you so much. So I'm going to turn this over to Talavo. You spoke a little bit about You spoke about language being a big barrier, older generations and things like that. So I'm gonna dig a little deeper, and I'm gonna ask you, what are some of because culture is so important in the AAPI community, especially for immigrants and refugees who are still rather new to the country. What are some cultural challenges you face in engaging with the AAPI community?
So I certainly want to unpack more from my last response to the last question, aside from, of course, language being a limitation, and then just the lack of understanding of how important it is to be civically engaged. But I also think there's also a lack of prioritizing, or the lack of understanding why it's important to prioritize, or at least to be civically engaged, because many of our people, many of our communities are hardworking. They are always trying to make or ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck. So being civically engaged most certainly will be the last thing on their minds. It's ensuring that their bills are paid, that there's a roof over their family's head, that there's food on the table. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges when I've done outreach is and engaging with people in our community here locally within the Bay Area, is that they just don't see the importance of it because of the struggle that they're trying to keep a roof over their families' heads and food on the table. So I think it's so vital, and I think it's important that legislation that would raise the minimum wage, federal minimum wage, to $15. I think it's so important because I think that would somewhat alleviate the pressure that that many communities of colors and the disparities that we're having. Because once there's less of a burden, I think that they would have, and having to think about making these ends meet, I think they can start to begin a conversation around why it's important to be civically engaged. So I think that's why I'm a big supporter of, I think everyone here is a big supporter of the federal minimum wage being lifted to $15, because a living wage, where we're at now, is certainly not a living wage. I mean, I think, like our current president always says when he was on the campaign, out on the campaign trail, is someone working a full-time job should not be struggling or be in poverty. So I think that's certainly one of the biggest aspects of why it's so challenging to just get them, to connect with them in these kind of conversations and get them activated and motivated.
Thank you so much for that. So what you said just reminded me of the work that the California Democratic Party is doing on trauma and resiliency. And what I heard you say is that we are in survivor mode. We don't have time. And I'm in no way a trauma expert, but we're learning about how when you are in survivor mode, you're in no way, it doesn't allow space for creativity and for proactivity. So Tony, because you're Vietnamese and you talked about the war and about the challenges and within the Southeast Asian community, there's a lot of trauma. So I want to dig a little deeper in regards to, beyond cultural, whether it's mental health issues or whatever. What are some of the challenges you face in engaging with the Vietnamese community?
Yeah, I mean, I think just speaking on a personal level, it's a conservative community, right? I think, especially looking, from Houston, where I'm from, and then looking to Orange County as an example, is that I think particularly for older generations, they sort of gravitate toward sort of an anti-communism sort of mantra, and the Republican Party has been able to use that to get Republican Vietnamese Americans elected. I think that sort of shows the bastion of sort of that strength within Orange County. And I think both as the party, as well as organizations like us as Equality California that are are progressive organizations, how do we continue to do the work in these communities, working with the groups on the ground to educate about our own issues, and then showing that the shared experiences of why we support your values, and we should work together as a collective to elect the right candidates who truly have your best interests at heart, who aren't just saying oh, I'm Vietnamese and therefore you should vote for me. Because now we are grateful that we have democratic, progressive Vietnamese Americans running for office. So how do we make sure that we uplift these folks and give them the resources so that they are viable in a lot of these districts across the state and across the country, so that it's not a black or white for these folks, right? There are options there. If you do want to support one of your own, this is why you should support the Democratic candidate or the progressive candidate, because they truly are caring about your issues. I think is really important. I think for us as LGBTQ issues pertains working with API folks, how do we continue to educate API leaders about our issues, and that they in turn are able to talk to their own communities. I think sometimes, particularly for older generations, people say that they're a Democrat, but then get a little bit squeamish in talking about trans rights, to an older generation, or marriage equality. And how do we just normalize, and as folks are coming out within their own communities, so that these aren't taboo subjects, talking to the broader Vietnamese American or broader AAPI organizations and community members. I think it's incumbent upon organizations like mine to do that work, so that we're not coming when you need us for legislation or for an election, but we've been there year round working with other organizations to talk about these issues and standing up for each other.
Thank you so much. So we have about 3 more minutes. So I have one last question, Aref. I'm going to start with you. Today, the Asian American community is one of the fastest growing in California. How can the California Democratic Party work across these communities, hard to reach communities that are often overlooked and feeling disenfranchised? And how can we be a partner to those communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it really does come from a place of understanding. We are in a place where we have the largest segment of the AAPI community is new immigrants. And generally speaking, like when we opine on like foreign issues, for example, if you look at the Israel-Palestine debate going on within the party now, those take a lot of nuances. And when the largest growing segment of the AAPI community is new immigrants, we have to be very careful in that same way and very nuanced in that same way, that we're not disenfranchising any one AAPI group over another, and making sure that we're empowering our voices. One of my favorite quotes is actually comes from Want to Start a Revolution, Radical Women in the Black Freedom Struggle. And it's the fact that people were working towards creating new structures and political movements free of racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia, in order to create a place where everyone feels welcome. And despite their differences in how folks might feel, if we do that as a party, we can create a space where everyone feels welcome. I do think there's a lot more as well that the party can do, just reaching out digitally to these communities. For example, foreign or new immigrant communities do have their own ethnic media, WeChat, all of these different types of ethnic social media as well, that we need to be utilizing to reach out to populations where they are, both physically and online.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Ngo Ia and then Tony and Talavo. So Ngo Ia, if you can quickly talk about how the California Democratic Party can partner with Hmong communities a little better. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that today's conversation is such a great start, right? To see the variety and diversity of who's represented. I think that's beautiful. It's amazing. Thank you so much, team, for doing such a good job in putting this together. I would say my only thing is to provide space for the community to lead. They definitely know what is best, what works. And so, that has been my biggest lesson learned in the past 12 years, is ensuring that, we're providing space for the community to lead, but also being really honest about what we know and don't know about each other. right? Because there's so much that we have yet to learn within our own Asian American Pacific Islander communities. And there's so much for other folks to learn about us as well. So I think, we need to be really honest and open about those conversations.
Thank you. Tony?
Just echoing the last comment, I think, continuing, in addition to letting, folks have space to lead, I think just continuing to uplift voices as well. And I think, Sherry, you mentioned, only one female panelist. I think, how do we continue to recruit folks as well? We do an annual convening, bringing together all of the elected and appointed LGBTQ officials across the state. And there's only a handful of API folks out of, 300 of those officials. And there's only one female queer API woman, Janice Lee, BART director up in the Bay Area. And so how do we make sure that we are, ensuring that, broad representation of what, queer Asian identities look like across the state, and being able to sort of support that, together, both through the party as well as outside organizations like mine, I think will really, show visibility and leadership within, AAPI communities, because we know, community leaders are so important, particularly for older generations. How do we continue to uplift those voices to show the breadth of, our various communities?
Thank you so much, Talavo.
Definitely echo what everyone else has said. To keep it short and sweet, I think outreach is so important. Anytime there's a conversation around or anything happening around the umbrella of AAPI, us Pacific Islanders are more than likely usually left out of that conversation, or we're usually the last ones invited to the table, which I understand we are a difficult community to reach. So there isn't any, not throwing any blame out there, but I think it is so important that as a party, and it's so vital that we continue to outreach to these hard to reach communities, because we are so multifaceted and there's so many of us. And I think the fact that we're such a fast growing community, we are certainly a force and a power to be reckoned with as a voting bloc in elections moving forward. And we saw that in this 2020 election. So I think it's so important that the party continues to outreach. But thank you again for having me on.
Thank you guys so much for joining me and all of us on this panel today. I am super inspired. I have all these notes. I'm going to take them home and study them, but I definitely want to stay connected with you all. Everyone has such a different perspective, but have the same mission and goals in mind. So thank you guys so much. I know sitting on a panel can be daunting, and talking about your story and being vulnerable, especially as Asian people, we don't like that. We don't like to talk about our feelings. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. So up next, we have Lizzie Habuer, who is our organizing director, who has a couple words that she wants to say. Lizzie, take it away.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this panel. And again, love hearing from so many different folks across the state, especially, during our Asian AAPI Heritage Month. So I'm just here to quick tell you, if you're not already aware, that there is a recall against Governor Newsom that is happening. We are in the process right now of kind of some of the logistics around figuring out when the election date is. So I will have more information on that for you, but I'm here to kind of give you an update and let you know a little bit more about the organizing work that you can look forward to over the next couple of months. After 2020 and after our successes around winning the White House, I'm sure some of us thought that it was time to rest. However, the far right here in California mounted an anti-recall campaign against Governor Newsom. And so this is really a far right Republican power grab by those folks because, as many of you are aware, we have, a registration advantage here in California. There are 10 million Democrats, and we have a really broad representation here. And so, when it comes to those statewide offices, it's very hard for a Republican to win. And really the only way is through some of these kind of methods, such as a recall. And so I'm here to just let you know that if you want to find out more information about the recall campaign and what we're doing on the anti-recall side, so from Governor Newsom's team and here at CDP, India so kindly put that in the chat. You can go to stoptherepublicanrecall.com. Through there, you can sign up to first off, show that you support the anti-recall campaign, that you support Governor Newsom unequivocally, like we do here at the party. You can also sign up to volunteer. There's currently a small texting program running, and then we're going to have more options, especially as the economy starts reopening, around June 15th. We can expect to be out there talking to people in person as much as we can and are able to. And lastly, you can always donate through that link as well. So I would suggest, if you want to kind of keep updated about the efforts around the recall and how we're fighting that, go to stoptherepublicanrecall.com and you can sign up to volunteer, sign up to keep in touch with the campaign, because we know that we really need someone in the governor's mansion in Sacramento who's there to actually represent everyone in California. That includes our AAPI brothers and sisters, for me, as well as everyone in California. And we know that Governor Newsom is the right person for the job. So check out that link. And with that, I get the lovely job of introducing, for some closing remarks, our brand new CDP secretary, Melahat Rafi. Thank you, and take it away, Melahat.
Welcome to organizing an AAPI Communities event. My name is Melahat Rafi, and I'm honored to be your CDP secretary. The California Democratic Party and the AAPI caucus of the CDP have been working together over the last few weeks to unify community leaders across California who have been working hard to uplift voices in hard-to-reach communities. As the month of May comes to an end and we continue to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month and highlight the stories of our AAPI siblings, California Democratic Party has been working to build a pathway to support young Democratic leaders. Many of our elected officials and some of our CDP staff have started out as interns for the California Democratic Party. As a part of this program, we recently launched our paid internship program. In the chat, you'll find a link on how you can help young Democrats get involved. We have a goal of raising $1,000 today, and I know with your help and support, we can get there. Thanks for being here tonight, and thanks for all that you do. Good night.